My name is Philip Williams. I'm the CEO of IsoEnergy. We're a globally diversified uranium miner and
Minor.
explorer with assets in the top jurisdictions in the world for uranium mining, being Canada, the US, and Australia. We're getting our US assets ready for restart, back into production, past producing mines in Utah. And we're focusing on the highest grade uranium resource in the world in Canada at the Hurricane deposit.
Mr. Williams, good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you.
Been a while. You guys have been on the road. That's for sure. In fact, I bumped into Marty on his way to a conference yesterday in London. Let's talk about sort of recent news. Obviously, the acquisition. Why did that make sense to you?
Yeah, look, we're obviously very excited to get that Toro acquisition announcement out into the market. It's something we've been working on for a while, and I think you know, Matt, we are a team of guys who've been around the uranium space for a long time. We've accumulated a lot of assets in our company, but we know of a lot of other projects that we've been interested, keeping an eye on, and this is one of them. So what we love about Toro, first of all, I said off the top, we're focused in Canada, we're focused in the US, we're focused in Australia. We have a group of projects in Australia, but we haven't quite, to this point, gotten that marquee flagship asset. The Toro acquisition gives us that. The Wiluna project is a sizable resource. There's about 75 million pounds. There's a history of permitting. There's a strategic partner in place, and really quite compelling economics. And subject to some policy changes within Western Australia, which we think are on the horizon, a relatively aggressive timeline towards production. So it checks a lot of boxes. As I said, we've been following it for a long time. In fact, ISO was a shareholder of the company prior to making that announcement. So really just checked all the boxes and was just a natural move for us.
Okay, and just sticking with that, I mean, what are the immediate integration steps for Toro? I mean, how are you going to prioritize the advancement of Wiluna?
Yeah, so the first thing obviously is we have to get the transaction closed. So it's going to take till the end of Q1 for that to happen. Obviously, Toro has to take it to their shareholders; they have to vote on it. So just think about us taking the company in end of Q1, early Q2. What we like about the company, I mean, it's quite a lean team, but very technically astute, and they've been around the project for a long time. So we intend to integrate the entire Toro team into our business, and so there'll be a lot of consistency and a lot of institutional knowledge about the project that we'll bring into the company. And then we've got a game plan to advance a couple of different initiatives that were already in sort of Toro's business plan, including some infill drilling on the Lake Maitland project, which is one of the three deposits that make up the greater Wiluna project. There's also plans to do a pilot plant to test out some of the metallurgical work that they have been doing, which was giving some very interesting results. And all of that will culminate into the typical studies that you see from ourselves and other Canadian companies, 43101 resource report, 43101 PEA, and that will all come, I would give us 12 to 18 months post completion of the acquisition to execute on those plans.
Right, and obviously you're going to advance I assume you're going to advance to a sort of more robust PFS scenario. How do you do that under the kind of current Western Australian current policy environment? And how does that affect things like, the how you spend your money and how you time things, given that sort of lack of policy clarity?
It's a great point. So we do it very measured, very carefully, and with as much feedback and communication with the administration as we can. So we have been seeing comments from the government, particularly Premier Cook, that are constructive around the uranium space. You have to remember that Western Australia, Australia writ large, has the largest amount of uranium resources of any country in the world. So it's a great place to be to start with. Western Australia has many significant deposits, including the Wiluna project, two that are owned by Cameco and one that's owned by Deep Yellow. All of those projects, including Wiluna, have had permits in the past, both state and federal permits. And so these comments that we've been seeing out of the government relate to projects that have those permits. They're making the right comments around being supportive of those moving ahead when market conditions also align. So it's going to be a measured approach. We know what the work programs are, but we're going to do them, as we continue to see positive news and positive commentary out of the government, and of course we'll be interacting with them along the way and making sure that what we're doing on the project level and what our expectations around timing to advance those projects align with what the government wants.
I think what you said there earlier was that you like the quality of the assets that this brings into your portfolio. Um, how do you think they stack up, and how much more work do you think you need to do on things like Dorton, Theseus, and Nathanda to make them sort of globally relevant?
Yeah, I mean, look, those resources are outside of the main Wiluna project, so we'll spend less time and energy on those,
Okay.
particularly until we get really strong positive signals from the government. It's the Wiluna project proper, which is Lake Way, Centipede, Millipede, and Lake Maitland. Those are the three that we're going to focus on. Again, those are the ones that were subject to those previous permits. So that's what we're focused on. The other ones we'll spend less time on, but there is value there, and as you've seen from us in the past, if there's ways that we can extract value from that, realize value from those secondary projects, we'll certainly look to do that.
So, I mean, what spin outs or joint ventures?
Absolutely. I mean, needless to say, we are very, very bullish on where this space is going, and the comment that all pounds everywhere will be needed ultimately, we think is appropriate. And so when we've done any deal that we've done over the history of the company, and we've done a lot, and we get projects that don't quite that aren't part of the core four, is what we're calling them today, but projects that we see ultimately being in the ISO project pipeline, we've been successful at divesting them, joint venturing them, selling them, partnering with others on them, and we'll continue to look to do that, particularly as it relates to the other assets within Toro that we're picking up.
Okay, so you're going to move that along the kind of scoping level, from scoping level concept through to kind of more technical maturity, but you'll do it at a pace that's appropriate in Australia. Okay.
Exactly, and we might surprise ourselves and the market in how fast we can move it ahead. But we're going to take signals from the government. Again, we're seeing some constructive commentary, but let's see what the follow through is.
Okay, so look, I want to kind of sort of step back and sort of with this acquisition, I think it's in keeping with your brand. You make these kind of big moves, but you also, there's been a sort of shift towards more advanced projects, which is sort of, I think the market is reacting positively to things like exploration, though, and strategy. So what does that look like within the current portfolio? What are you focused on? We've talked about Dorado, JV potential in the past. How are you prioritizing that side of the business?
Yeah, look, it's a great question, and it's one that we wrestle with and grapple with regularly. For sure, the biggest bang for your buck today in exploration is in the Athabasca, and we've seen it with, as you said, with Dorado, right? So we did that transaction with PurePoint. We consolidated a massive land position, and the PurePoint guys went out and immediately made a discovery, and it was kind of proof of concept for that sort of model of exploration. And so when we think about where are we going to spend our dollars, we start in the Athabasca, and so we're going to allocate significant additional funds next year to the PurePoint joint venture. We're maxing out our budgets there, and we're also looking at, of course, LaRocque. So continuing to build on the results that we've been getting, both drilling immediately on strike from Hurricane and more regionally, is top priority for the company. And then as we look down in the portfolio, increasingly we're thinking that exploration in the U.S. is a good place to spend money, because it hasn't been done in a long time, and there's low hanging fruit within our portfolio of targets that we can go after. We are drilling the Flatiron property right now, which is just adjacent to the Tony M mine. It's a prolific area, the Henry Mountains. We think there's lots more uranium to be found, so we're doing a relatively small program, but a sort of starter program. Again, proof of concept. Can we go find more uranium in that area? And if we have success in this program, we'll allocate more resources there, and potentially to some of our other U.S. projects.
I've got to ask you, the portfolio side, it's growing, and I know you will look to monetize and maximize the value to the company. Are there any of these kind of smaller projects which people might be expecting you to offload that actually you think, do you know what? We might surprise you next year on those.
I mean, I don't know. Like we think about the core four, right? So we think about hurricane, we think about and we think about the Utah assets all as one. These are mines that can go back in production very quickly. We think about Coles Hill, and then Wiluna will be part of the core four. So anything outside of the core four, I think you could see us do something with. But remember, the business plan has always been, hey, if we put a project out into another company, take equity back, which you can look and you know this, but we have significant equity positions in a number of other companies. But the idea is if they do something on one of those projects that takes it to a level where it would make sense to come back into the portfolio, we're certainly open to that. It's not too dissimilar to business models of big gold companies that have an investment book. They have shares of companies that they're watching, and if those projects make sense ultimately to come up into the mothership, they'll look to do that. And we're keeping our eye on all those projects very closely for the same reason.
Okay, so I'm loving the core four. That's great, the core four. But you're saying if we are going to deploy exploration capital, that's going to be focused on the Athabasca, LaRocque East, and Athabasca strategy, right?
Yes.
With regards to the importance of in terms of valuation, perceived valuation for your company, U.S. strategy, is that number one?
For evaluate, I mean, look, I think that it's like 1A and 1B. It is undeniable that the bulk of the value for the business today is in Canada, the Hurricane deposit. I mean, we've been through this, and we can go through it again, but the characteristics that we have there, this is a top tier asset. It will be developed into a mine. There's value to unlock there. In terms of the U.S., I mean, what's happening in the United States today is a massive change in the favorability towards nuclear power, the growth of nuclear power, and ultimately what's got to come with it, which is rebuilding the supply chain beneath the reactors. And it starts, of course, with uranium, moves up to conversion and enrichment, but we're in the uranium side. The uranium supply side is broken in the United States today, and this administration is going to do everything it can to fix it. What that looks like could be any number of things. The strategic reserve is already out there, and maybe they'll be using that more so in the future, or maybe they're going to do deals like they've done with these other critical mineral companies, signing off takes, making investments in these companies. But we have a group of assets in the United States that could be a part of the solution to the problem. We have near-term production assets. We could be delivering uranium into the strategic reserve or into the market to U.S. utilities in very short order. And so there's value creation there. And then we have, the sort of elephant in the country, maybe we could call it, in Coles Hill. We have the largest uranium resource in the United States, in Virginia, 160 million pounds. This could go a long way to helping solve some of these supply chain issues. And so we think there's tremendous value creation potential from that asset as well as the Utah assets.
So how does because the US market, I'm talking about the financial market, is obviously the 800-pound gorilla in the room. And you're listed on the New York Stock Exchange, I get it. But do they look at you as an genuinely American company with some Canadian assets, or are they looking to you to kind of exploit the US assets? Obviously, as you just outlined, there's a lot sitting there yet to be, well, I guess exploited properly. What do those conversations look like when you're sitting in New York?
Yeah, look, well, you're talking about from the investment community?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think the investment community focuses on the assets and the value that can be ascribed to the assets. I don't think they're quite as concerned, oh, you're a Canadian company, you're not a U.S. company, particularly, as you say, because we have that listing. And I think it's similar for the government. I mean, the U.S. government is trying to bring U.S. production forward. As a Canadian listed company, a U.S. listed company, Canadian headquartered company, I think we still get the credit that we should get as a partner to develop these assets. But I think it's more about the assets themselves and how to bring those forward. And look, a bunch of the deals that the government has done have been with Canadian listed companies, Canadian domiciled companies, but it's where the assets are that's the most important part.
Right. Okay. And obviously, been very clear about where you want your assets to sit in terms of jurisdictions, which I guess safer tier one jurisdictions. You've sorted out your portfolio in that way. But in terms of the blend of advanced development, and all of this kind of potential on exploration, how are you weighting that? And more importantly, what are these kind of institutional investors? You're creeping up to what, $800 million at the moment. They've got expectations for the type of portfolio that they expect you to create. What is that? What does that look like?
Well, look, we're telling them our business model and pitching them on our business model. I mean, we are a company that's emulating much bigger companies. I think there's definitely a group of investors who would say, "Oh, we'll just do a single asset deal." That's very far easier for us to appreciate. But what I think's resonated with investors is that uranium is a very difficult commodity to be in, and I've been in the space since 2006, and time again, single asset, single jurisdiction companies have gone off the rails for some reason. It's almost always been a geopolitical issue, but it can also be a technical issue. And so what we've done, and we've done this on purpose, is just not have all the eggs in one basket, so to speak, and give ourselves multiple shots on goal and also projects that are at different stages of development. So you have this cadence to your projects that you can focus on one, bring it into production. And that's a different skill set than doing a feasibility study, and that's a different skill set than doing exploration work. And we have those teams working on those projects at those speeds. And really, I think as much as anything, it's about educating the investment community that this is the right way to build a business in this space. And we're reaching up, right? So our business model is the same as the leaders in the industry. And if we just talk about Cameco, to be specific, they're the only other company in these same three countries. Of course, they're in Kazakhstan as well, and we don't have designs to go there, but that's where we're trying to reach up. And that's how we built this model, and I think it is getting traction. It is resonating with investors.
But how do you make your decision making with regards to capital allocation in a market which has, quite frankly, been a bit erratic? Do you know what I mean? In the sense that the general trend is good, and I think we've talked in the past about the demand picture is fantastic. Supply, well, there's a big long discussion to be had there. But when you've got capital available to you, you've gone and done an acquisition. We've talked about exploration. Do you have to be slightly contrarian in your thinking or long term in your thinking when you're trying to work out one, do you raise money, and if you do, what do you spend it on?
You know what? It's a bit of both. So it's actually, we have a long term vision. We know where this company is going in the long term, but in the short term, the market environment changes, and the appetite for different programs within our portfolio sort of peaks and wanes. So what we do is we build a number of cases into our budgeting process, and we say, like, this is the base case how we're going to allocate our funds, and then we have opportunities within the portfolio where if we want to accelerate certain aspects of it because the market's there, the signals are there, the jurisdiction is starting to get more constructive, then we can sort of turn on expenditures. So it's a long-term vision, but a relatively shorter-term approach to what are we going to do, how are we going to allocate the funds in any given sort of 6 to 12-month period.
Okay. And we just a little bit of macro, if you don't mind. You've got a bit more sight and a line of sight on what's actually happening with regards to things like the US strategic uranium reserve expansion, and how the US government is, I guess, influencing projects advancing, being funded, and I guess the market kind of reacts really positively to that. But it then, from an outsider's point of view, it just seems again a little bit erratic, is a word I'd use, in terms of 1 minute it's talk all people talk about. We've got tech companies coming in, and demanding energy, and then the next thing is this all silence on the Western Front. So how do you view that? How do you react to that?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think what you have to do is cut out some of the noise, the day-to-day noise. The truth is the market is going in one direction. Demand is going up. At what cadence and how fast it's going to go, and are all of these new announcements around new reactors or SMRs and data centers, is it all going to happen at the speed is being talked about? I don't know the answer to that, but probably not. But in any event, the demand is going to far outstrip supply on any period that you want to look at, even from the near term to go out to 2040. So there's a major issue on the supply side. And if we talk about how particularly the U.S. government is thinking about it, I mean, they are trying to fix the supply chain, and it's not a quick fix. You can't just go and do one thing. And so they're building up. First of all, they're building up the understanding of what is wrong and what can be done about it, and then they're going to use all the tools in their toolbox to help fix it. And you mentioned the strategic reserve; it's already been put in place, and it's done a little bit of purchasing, but I expect that to accelerate, and we're going to get more information about exactly how that's going to happen. And then all of the same tools that they've been using in other critical minerals, from project investments to loans to accelerated permitting timetables, they're all going to happen. And so it might look a bit erratic, but there is a very coordinated and organized game plan to push the supply chain. And again, I'm talking uranium specifically, but every aspect of the nuclear supply chain is going to get attention. And it'll be one of these things. I mean, one of the fascinating things about this market is every day you get some positive news around nuclear power, and that doesn't seem to, and every day it doesn't seem, those ones don't always, each one individually doesn't have necessarily an impact, but then the dam will break something. And it might be something or it might be nothing that causes it to break, but the realization of what is happening, because it is real, the demand growth is real and supply constraint is real, that will come, those pieces will come together, and we will be in a completely different environment, both in terms of the equity prices and the underlying commodity prices, and directionality as to where they're going.
Okay, so basically, there's no one thing. It's a weight of activity, messaging, money that's going to make the difference. Because I think this space has been kind of guilty of looking to near-term catalysts to change the fortunes of everyone.
Well, no, you're 100% right, and because we see all the news, the nuclear power side, but if it doesn't translate into price action, spot price or term price in the next week, the market can become quite fickle, and
Yeah.
it gets bored quite quickly. I mean, you and I, prior to coming on, we're talking about some marketing travel that I've done. I've just come back from a 2-week trip where a series of investors that I met, of 75% of those investors were out of the uranium trade, not because they didn't think it was exciting and the long-term picture was there. They're just playing a more short-term game. And so we have to, so for us as a business, we have to sort of cut out that noise and just operate and move our projects ahead, because when that dam breaks, it's going to be, I believe it's going to be a tremendous place to be, and we have tons of value to unlock in our assets.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, isn't it? I think if you look back over the last 5 years, the type of buying behavior and the type of messaging narrative running through the market, you look back now and you go, kind of childish, and it feels like now it's time for a bit more of a mature adult conversation about the trajectory of this space, and based on fundamentals, which I think you certainly have been one of the advocates for. Well, look, Phil, I mean, so what's the message here, the takeaway for people looking in at IsoEnergy in terms of you're likening yourself or setting yourself up to like some of the big boys? What do you think that converts into in 2026?
Well, I think it converts into significant developments at all of those core 4 projects that people can hang their hats on and say, wow, these are worth way more than A, they paid for them, and B, they're implied in the price of the company. And I think what we offer to investors is, again, this diversified portfolio. There's a lot of value inherent in our business. We're well funded. We're well backed. We're not going anywhere. We're going to advance these assets. If you're along for the ride, you can watch us, achieve those milestones in the business in each of those projects. And I think the one thing you can take from what we've done over the last sort of 5-6 years in creating this business is, if we're not getting value for any asset in our portfolio, we will figure out a way to get value by some creative way. And it could, everything is on the table to maximize the value of these assets for our shareholders over the, short, medium, and long term.
Bill, it's good to catch up with you. It's been a good year. Looking ahead, looks like more to come.
Yeah, well, no, we're very excited about 2026.